Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Google Partner Academy on Air. My name is Erica.
And I'm Emerson.
And we're excited for today's session to run through some really helpful information and also keep the session very interactive. So be sure to submit your questions below, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end.
Great. So let's get started. Today, we're going to be talking about shopping campaign optimization. We're going to be covering two main areas: how to effectively structure campaigns based off of the account structure, and also how to best optimize your bids to maximize value. So let's get started from the structure perspective. So you want to organize your campaigns based on your product segmentation and key performance indicators, or your KPIs. So ideally, we're going to be thinking about your product lines, your profit margins, and your best sellers. And you can group similar products together. So don't be afraid to go granular. You can subdivide by the key performance indicators, or the KPIs, inventory, seasonality, and more. The way you're going to go about doing that is through using custom labels. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So also, if this is an ongoing process, so don't be afraid to revise your structure if necessary as trends emerge. To identify top performing products within existing product groups. And this is an ongoing process, so let's keep it going.
Constantly optimizing. So when we talk about creating your shopping campaign, there are kind of three approaches that you can use. The first is a product approach. So this is to bid based on things like brands or product lines. So for particular brands, you tier your bidding in a certain way, or for certain types of products that you sell, you bid in a different way. A second approach is to bid based on performance. So this is bidding on your top and low performers differently. So perhaps you bid really aggressively on things that are high performing for you, and you still want to show for low performing products, but they're not necessarily a priority. So you may tier your bidding based on performance. And the third approach is a hybrid model. So this is the idea of bidding according to both the catalog of the products that you have and how they perform. So some sort of a hybrid where you may have a product line that's a lower priority, but because it's a top performer, you bid a certain way, as opposed to a product that's high priority, but actually a low performer. So there's a hybrid approach that we'll talk about and go a little bit in depth into what the structure can look like.
Right.
So here's an example of how this actually looks with a potential e-commerce site. So the first approach is the product approach. This is the idea that you have one product type, in this case apparel, and you separate it into two different product types. In this case, men's, women's, and everything else, which may include things like children's clothes. So within men's and women's, those two product types, you also have things separated by brand. So perhaps Acme apparel sells particularly well, and you simply have things separated by brands and product lines. That is the way you're choosing to bid. The second approach is performance. So this is when you're doing top performing and low performing products. So in this case, you would have a custom label for best-selling products. And we'll go into how to set up custom labels, what that actually means. But you would have your best-selling products and separate them based on their margin. So products that have a high profit margin versus products that have a low profit margin. And then maybe something for everything in between. Here, for those high profit margin products, you would separate it then into item IDs and perhaps bid a certain way for item IDs that belong to the high margin group and another way for items that belong to the low margin group. And then the last visual here is the hybrid approach. So this is the idea that you start with that whole apparel grouping, you separate into men's and women's, but within men's and women's, you tier your bidding based on that best-selling performance metric of what's selling best, or perhaps high margin items based on the custom labels that you create, knowing your products and how they sell. So these are the three approaches kind of visually if you're thinking about applying them to an e-commerce site.
Certainly. And there are a variety of other ways to go about doing this. These are just templates, so keep that in mind. There's no one way to having success within a shopping campaign. But let's take a look at a specific case study. In this example, we're going to be using the e-commerce website Farfetch. So Farfetch organized their product groups by category and by brand. They then created a separate campaign for their top trending and best selling products and set it to a high campaign priority. So campaign priority is going to be set at the campaign level. You'll have the option to toggle between low, medium, and high. And this really just prioritizes one campaign versus the next. And this is going to be important when you're running a seasonal campaign versus your always serving campaign. So in terms of Farfetch, This structure really improved their conversion rate. As we can see, a 37% increase. Additionally, there was a 300% ROI, return on their investment. So it was a really effective change for them.
And you can access this link below to read a little bit more in depth about that case study, exactly the actions they took, the changes they made, and what the results were of those changes. It's always a good idea to learn about what's working for other e-commerce sites, especially those that may be similar to yours, and see if you can apply any of those learnings to your own structure or to your own products.
Definitely. So given what Farfetch did, we always want you to continually be asking questions of what you could be doing better. So ask yourself, how are you currently organizing your campaigns? Did the results of the Farfetch case study surprise you? What are they doing that you may not have tried before?
And a lot of these things could actually be quite small. It's not necessarily you need to restructure your entire, shopping campaign or separate into multiple campaigns. It may just be small changes that can actually make a big impact. So here's how you can organize your campaigns by responding to the retail calendar. And Emerson alluded to this earlier in terms of having a core campaign that's always on. It's your foundational campaign. And this is great to have for long-term testing and optimization. As you're making adjustments, you want to make sure that you have a core performance campaign so that as you're trying new things or experimenting, you're not losing too much performance. You have this core campaign always on. The second tier is to have a best sellers campaign. This allows you to really tap into the potential of your top performing products and make sure that you are allocating your budget in a certain way and bidding aggressively for products that you know can sell well, and that'll bring you a higher return for your overall shopping approach. And then the last one is, of course, flexible and efficient short-lived promotions. These are things like seasonal campaigns, maybe for fall, spring, summer, or certain sales that you have. So it's natural to stack on top of your core campaign, perhaps a bestseller campaign, and then to also have some seasonal ones that are time-bound. So keep this structure in mind when you think about your retail calendar and planning out what your approach looks like for the whole calendar year, as opposed to just right now.
Definitely. So when you go about restructuring your campaigns, let's say you're going to go ahead and use the key performance indicator based model. So you're going to go adjust your bids based off of your high performing products. You need to use custom labels when you're going to go about doing this. So this is where you have the ability to change your custom labels to custom label 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And as you can see on the slide here, you can define them based off of what's important to your business. So if we're going to be using seasons, your possible custom label values can be spring, summer, fall, or winter. So once you define your values and map your possible values, you've essentially defined your strategy, and you'll be able to add the custom label attributes at your feed, so that you can use feed rules to apply this to your campaign. And let's learn a little bit more about that, Erica.
Absolutely. So when you're uploading your product data, you of course include things like price and a description of the product. But AdWords doesn't necessarily know what products are high margin for you or what products are low margin for you. So custom labels are a way to give AdWords information that really only you have so that it can make informed decisions for you. So when we talk about using feed rules, we're going to walk through an example of actually implementing this based on price bucket. So a common approach that we see is tiering your bidding or applying a label based on where in the price scale a particular product falls. So for this business, $1 to $100 is considered a low price product. And then the opposite end of the spectrum, $500 to $2,500 is considered high price with medium in between. So using feed rules, you can set up these rules so that you can bid according to these price buckets. So you set up these rules with conditions, and the basic information needs to be somewhere in your feed. So in this case, we're using the feed attribute of price and creating a label based on that.
So using these filters based off of the custom labels or not using the filters is essential in the way that you restructure your campaigns. So if you take a look at the top example of all of the parts for this bike shop example, you'll notice that they don't have any inventory filters on. So this is going to show to all products. And as we've been discussing, this would be realistically one of your low priority, always on campaigns. Now looking at the next option, the product type can be set to bicycle. Let's say you want to promote your new bicycles that your business has just released. And in order to do that, you would have to create a custom filter and set the filter type to equal bicycle. And then finally, we can filter based off of your top sellers. So this nice red bike has really been proving to do really well. So we want to make sure that we're bidding higher on that product to maximize for conversion. So you would create a custom filter, let's say custom label 0, and have that equal top seller so that you can add that filter and adjust your bids accordingly.
Absolutely. So here's a recommended shopping structure. The first is to have, again, that always on 100% of your inventory campaign. This is a lower priority campaign. It's kind of the catch-all, if you will. And you may have, a lower budget for this particular campaign. You're getting 100% of your inventory with no exclusions, no filters that Emerson just mentioned. On top of that, you'll probably also have some key category campaigns. These are things like your bestseller campaign. This is a more medium priority, and this is really where you want to put a lot of your budget behind. It's always on, and it's really targeting the product types or brands or however you choose to segment or filter, the things that are a priority for you so that overall, for your overall AdWords approach, you're getting the most return on your investment. And then on top of that, you'll have those promotional campaigns, things that are time-bound. You'll do this based on custom label targeting as opposed to targeting based on something like product type or brand, which is already built in. And this is also really high priority because, again, it's time-bound and it's active only when you need it. So this is a way that you can think about, when you think about the different needs that you have throughout the retail calendar year, you can think about structuring your campaign this way and how you want to allocate your budget and use those filters and labels to your advantage.
Definitely. So you can also see here, the bids may be different based off of what type of priority campaign you're running. So as we alluded to earlier, the lower priority always on campaigns tend to have lower bids, just so that they're manageable, that they can always be on. And of course, the top priority high campaigns tend to have higher bids so that they can make a strong impact, hit the ground running right away and serve immediately on Google Shopping. So using these examples, these structural examples, let's take a look at Bed Bath & Beyond's website. So you can actually use your client's homepage as inspiration on how to structure your shopping campaigns. So take a look here at the all categories option on the left of Bed Bath & Beyond. And you've got gifts, dining, kitchen, bath, etc. Pretty much everything that they offer. So this is going to be your all products, always on campaign, set at the lower priority. The next option would be the top categories or the best sellers. So let's say Bed Bath & Beyond really strives, it really does a great job on their bath and their kitchen products. So this would be your medium priority. They tend to have a little bit of higher budget. We really want to make sure that those are serving very strongly. And then finally, you'll notice that, let's say it's Halloween time, there's a holiday around, and we really want to make sure that the promotional products within this Halloween holiday are serving as well. So these are going to be your high priority campaigns that may also have some higher bids because, again, we only have a limited of time to work with. Let's take a look at what else.
So here's an example of how we could structure the Bed Bath & Beyond account based on using their website for inspiration and understanding what their priorities would be. So again, we have that all products always on campaign, that low priority, it's really the bread and butter of their shopping account. In the middle there is really high priority or medium priority, with a high budget is the bath and kitchen, those things that are best sellers that we really want to emphasize. And then on top of that, which will change as the year goes on, are those promotional campaigns. So things like clearance and savings or college deals if it's the fall time when college students are moving in. So those things will switch out off and on, but they're high priority because they're time bound. So in the time that they're running, you really want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward with those particular items.
Certainly. So taking a look at something a little bit more granular, the bath campaign, which is one of the top performing products for Bed Bath & Beyond, you can separate this campaign into 3 different ad groups. And these ad groups are going to have certain bath products that also have been performing well. So bath shower, towels and rugs, and bath furniture. Now within these 3 ad groups, you're going to segment by additional product groups that are relevant to what's serving in those ad groups. Again, this just makes it really easy to adjust your bids accordingly. Let's say you want to increase your bids on shower heads. You can now do that because you've segmented within the product type within this specific ad group.
Absolutely. A retailer like Bed Bath & Beyond that has a lot of variety in their products, which is a common trend that we see with a lot of e-commerce sites, it's great to separate by product type, because rather than going in and trying to figure out, where are all my shower towels, I need to adjust the bids for them. You can have them separated by product type, and with one click, kind of have that established and separated out. It's a great way to make it more manageable. So let's clarify the difference between an ad group and a product group. Product groups are more granular, and as Emerson was just explaining, product groups are housed within an ad group. So product groups allow you to group products together to make things easier to manage. So rather than going in and changing a bid, let's say, for every single towel that Bed Bath & Beyond sells, you can create a towels product group so that with one click, you can adjust all those towels. It also makes it more manageable to analyze your performance, because you can see how all of your towels are performing. There probably isn't a lot of variation between products in a product group. If you're doing your product groups right, they're probably quite similar, which is why it makes sense to group them together. At the ad group level, you can apply things like negative keywords, you can do bid modifiers, and you can use different bid strategies. So let's say that, for towels, you want to do a particular type of bid strategy, but for other bath products, you want to use something else based on how they perform or what the profit margins are, whatever the reason may be. That's the reason at which you would separate things into ad groups. Also note that you can target specific remarketing lists for search ads and customer match audiences at the ad group level. So just keep these kind of structural things in mind as you're building things out. Again, product group is grouping similar products together so that it's easier to optimize, it's easier to view reporting, and really grouping things together that perform similarly.
So 7,280,640. This is the number of product groups in a real account. 9 product groups within 512 ad groups, all nested within 1,580 campaigns. Now, given the fact that about 80% of your clients' return on ad spend is driven only by 20% of their products, this is not manageable. So the big takeaway here is you can keep your campaigns manageable by structuring accordingly. You don't want to break everything down by item ID. That's actually going to be too much. So just keep this in mind as we move forward with additional structure.
And when you think about, for example, towels, someone may say, well, I'm going to group together hand towels versus bath towels. But when you get that granular, are you really going to bid differently based on those different product groups, or is something different between those product groups? And that's really what you want to ask yourself when you're considering separating things out a little bit more is this necessary for my bidding purposes, for my optimization purposes? And if it's not, then it probably doesn't make sense to keep getting more and more granular. So just keep that in mind. It's great to, separate things in a way that makes sense for your bidding, but you don't want to over separate and then have a lot to manage. So it's a great thing to cover for sure. So we want to cover what's wrong with this picture, because sometimes people take this idea of getting granular and they take it so far that it not only becomes unmanageable, but it actually becomes more difficult to get insights based on the data in your account. So in this picture, we have different item IDs, and you can see they all have different max CPCs, but you're actually not seeing a lot of this really valuable data, like your benchmark max CPC, the search impression share that you're losing due to rank, and other really valuable metrics. So in this case, if these items are all quite similar and their bids are actually pretty close to one another, it's actually more useful to separate these out into a group and look at the data that way, because you actually get insights from a product group as opposed to individual item IDs. So there are some cases where, let's say you only have like a business that has 4 item IDs. In that case, it may make sense to separate things out by item ID. Or if you have like 3 particular products that you really want to bid differently on. But in general, stick to product groups and let that guide the way, and so that you have a lot of data to get insights from.
Right. We know that a lot of you are used to managing regular search campaigns. The thing is, the difference between a search campaign and a shopping campaign is the keywords, right? Obviously many things, but the keywords bid in an individual search campaign. You have individual bids for the specific keywords. You don't want to apply that logic to individual item IDs because that's where it becomes a little bit overwhelming. unnecessary and difficult to manage. So one of these really useful metrics that we want to highlight today is going to be click share. So click share is the proxy for position. It's a better indicator for performance, opportunity, and it's increased by improving position and showing additional offers and the product listing ad units. So it can be influenced by bids. I mean, bids are primarily the strongest factor as to your click share metric, but it can also be influenced by changes in your feed quality. So this can be price, your image, your item description, etc. So all of these can change your click-through rate, which will also impact your click share.
So a lot of agencies particularly use position as a way to determine what changes they need to make to their bids in a search campaign. And you can use click share in the same way to determine what kind of changes you want to make for a shopping campaign. So again, think of click share as exactly that, a proxy for position. And click share is influenced by things that would normally influence quality score for a search campaign. Again, those bids and changes to your feed quality. Absolutely. So here's how to view click share in AdWords. You're going to navigate to the product groups tab in AdWords and then click on columns, modify your columns to look at the competitive metrics section. And here you're going to click add next to click share to add it as a column. And you can keep this always on so that you can always see your click share. And you can view this by device as well, which can be particularly useful since the experience of shopping is pretty different on a mobile device versus a desktop. So keep that in mind that you can segment by that, export that data, and see if there are any insights that come to light. And that can inform things like a mobile bid strategy for certain product types and other things like that.
Great. So here's an example. Like, what might be wrong with this picture? What might jump out as a little bit strange? As you can note, the search impression share is about 20% higher than the click share. And this may occur if we have a structure that may not be fully optimized. The PLAs are showing a good amount. However, people tend to not really be clicking on them. So as you can notice here, it's currently segmented by printers and scanners. Now, first of all, those are two different products, and that may be a little bit too broad. So we may want to actually segment by printers and by scanners, and we can even go beyond that using maybe the hybrid approach to segment by top performing printers or printer brands or printer models that people may directly search, and just to really help optimize the structure here.
Absolutely. You can think of search impression share as are my products getting in front of the potential purchasers? And then click share as, is it ranking high enough that people are actually clicking on it? So if your impression share is high, it means your products are showing. But if the click share is low, it means they may be showing too low. And instead, these potential customers are clicking other products that are ranking higher. Absolutely. So next, we're going to talk about how to optimize your bids in order to maximize your value. So we've gone through structurally how to get started, the different approaches that you can take. And now we're going to focus on bids and bid strategies that you can use to make the most of that structure. So there are two ways to optimize your bids. You can adapt bids based on the campaign structure that you've created. Again, bidding higher on products that you really want to show because they meet one of your key performance indicators. You can also consider applying these automated bidding strategies to your campaign. And Emerson's an expert and can tell you a lot about some of these bid strategies.
Right. So there are quite a few, I believe 6 automated bid strategies, but the ones that we're going to start focusing on right now is going to be enhance cost per click, target return on ad spend, and maximize clicks. So these are 3 strategies that offer the unique ability to optimize bids at the query level in order to help you achieve your goals and save time on bid management.
So here is an example of how you can subdivide into product groups and bid based on that structure. So in this case, we have a retailer that sells a wide range of products, apparel, electronics, furniture, and then a catch-all for everything else. And they're tiering their bidding based on the product type. So this is a way to use structure to adapt your bids. Pretty straightforward.
So given the fact that certain e-commerce sites may have tens of thousands or even millions of products, having more automated bid strategies may be the best option for you. But let's say you want to take a look at enhanced cost per click. It does give you the control to have the ability to manipulate your bids individually, but also allows you to layer real-time optimization. So you have your bid set from, you know your historical performance has done well at a certain bid, but you also want to take into account conversion data, and this is what enhanced cost per click allows you to do.
It's often the first automated bid strategy that an account will use to when they're dipping their toes into the automated bid strategy world, because it gives you a certain amount of control. You're still setting those max cost per clicks, but it's adding a layer of, like Emerson said, using that conversion data to optimize a little bit and fine tune those bids, because AdWords will see trends or see information that maybe you can't see with the human eye. And it'll help you just fine tune those bids. So it's still a control in your hands. It's not fully automated, but it gives you some automation to, again, just fine tune those bids.
Just a quick note that over the last quarter, that we removed the 30% max limit on enhanced cost per click. So it actually can go a little bit higher than that 30% limit. So keep that in mind if you may sometimes see a bid that may go over 30%.
Great note. So how do you go about choosing an automated bid strategy? Well, the first step, if you're interested, is to make sure that you have AdWords conversion tracking set up or Google Analytics imported conversion data. Either way, you need to make sure that you have this data so that AdWords has something to go on. It needs data to be able to inform how you should be bidding for your different products. So if you have 15 or more conversions in the last 30 days, then you're eligible to try enhanced cost per click. And again, this is helping you maximize those conversions, getting those sales while staying in control of your product group bids. So it's just adding, like Emerson said, 30% or potentially more to the bids that you set at the product group level. If you have 100 or more conversions in the last 30 days, then you're eligible for target return on ad spend. The idea behind this is that you're getting the maximum revenue for your given return on ad spend. So you set a target of, this is how much return I want to get for every dollar I put into my shopping account. And let's reach that target by bidding appropriately. And then another automated bid strategy that actually doesn't require any conversion data is maximize clicks. And this strategy is straightforward. It helps you get the most clicks for your budget. It's not necessarily doing this based on any of those things that we've talked about before in terms of bestsellers or things like that. But within the parameters that this is applied, it'll help you get the most clicks. So those are some automated bid strategy options and the guidelines that you must meet in order to try them out.
What's really cool about maximize clicks is that it doesn't require you to have conversion data in order to be an effective bid strategy, but it has the ability to enable enhanced CPC. So it will still be trying to focus on getting as many clicks within your daily budget, but if you do enable enhanced CPC, it will also become aware of an individual user that may match a high converter's profile. So it may actually want to increase their bids a little bit higher for that specific user.
And that brings up a great point that you don't have to choose one bid strategy for your entire account or even your entire campaign. You can apply different bid strategies for what makes sense. And also, if you're new to a bid strategy, maybe you want to experiment and see how it works. Give it a learning curve for a very small segment of your products, not too small. It's big enough that it's a good sample size, but you can really make sure that before you jump head in and use the enhanced CPC for every campaign you run or every ad group, to try it out at a smaller level just to see how it works for you.
So this slide explains that concept in a little more detail. So starting at the bottom of the triangle, what you want to do is have a catch-all for everything else, essentially all of your products that may have a lower return on ad spend. As the products become a little bit more higher priority, let's say you want to promote maybe a newer brand, as I was saying before, maybe like the new bike example, the bid may want to be a little bit higher. And then we're looking toward now our best selling products and maybe even individual item IDs that we really want to promote. Those are going to be the ones that are going to have the highest bids.
So here's an example of Acme Bikes and how they drove incremental profit for their best-selling bikes. So their initial structure was a $350 campaign in which they were selling bicycles, everything else, and parts. And so they had all of that campaign budget allocated to those three areas. What they found, though, was that within bicycles, mountain bikes was a high performer for them. They sold really well. Perhaps they had a high profit margin as well. And they wanted to make sure that every single day, $200 of that budget is attributed directly to mountain bikes specifically. And then 150 of the remaining budget went towards the everything else in the parts. So as you create, that first always on core campaign, think about what you want to separate into different product groups for bidding purposes, but also think about what you want to separate out into new campaigns based on how much budget you want allocated to certain things.
So you can bid based off of profit in order to analyze better your product value. So as a starting point, you can set up product groups that allow you to bid based off of this product's value. So in this example, we're going to use B&K Bikes that has over 200 SKUs in bicycles, 50 in clothing, 35 in parts, and 40 in miscellaneous. So they use internal margins to set efficient and specific bids, as we can see here. Now, the bikes generate varying profits across different types, and the bids, as you can see, ranging from $3 to $1.75 reflect this variation. Now, clothing and parts have less variation, so only one bid per category makes more sense for them. And then finally, the everything else catches all of the miscellaneous products.
So here's how you can bid based on profit. And this is a little formula to help you understand how you can calculate your profit margin and make sure you're setting the appropriate bids. So for each group of products with similar margins, so first you want to make sure you're grouping your products by the profit margin that you're receiving as a business. You want to average your profit from the sale of one product in that group. And then have the number of clicks or website visits that are needed to capture one sale. You can get this information from Google Analytics. It'll tell you, let's say in order to get one sale for a mountain bike, they need 40 clicks or 40 people to look at it for one person to choose to make that purchase. You'll then create a product group for each inventory cluster and apply your calculated bid. So this is a formula that you can use to make sure that you are using the structure that Emerson just explained, but also calculating your bids in a way that makes sense. So in this example, we have the average profit from a sale is $360 on a road bike, and the number of clicks it takes to get that sale is about 240 clicks. So we do a simple formula, and the road bike's bid comes out to $1.50.
So if you go to the Ad Groups tab within one of your shopping campaigns, you can use the bid simulator data to identify what to optimize first. And this is important, again, if you have a very large campaign to manage. So you'll see here that you have the 4 horizontal bars, and that's how you can actually get to the bid simulator. It's important that you actually modify the column to add the bid simulator. So a couple of points on this. Typically, the simulations are for the last 7 days. It does not estimate future search traffic and clicks. It's actually modeled after past traffic to determine impact. And it does take into consideration any existing bid adjustments. So it's important that because it's using historical data, that you don't make a lot of changes. That type of variation will make this data a little bit less credible. So just make sure that if you've been making a lot of changes recently, to wait, let's say, about a week or so and before checking some of these metrics.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, Bid Simulator is using historical data. It's not future looking into what your bids and traffic will look like in the future. So just keep that in mind. It's a tool to help guide the future based on what you've observed in the past. But again, making sure that you're not making too many changes, because if you make changes and then use Bid Simulator, your changes may have had the opposite effect, and then you're bidding in the exact opposite direction you want to make those changes.
Right.
So be sure to pay attention to your competition. And to do this, you can use the Auction Insights report. The Auction Insights report tracks the impact of your changes, and it allows you to really benchmark your impression share, your overlap rate, and your outranking share against your key competitors. So when you're making significant changes to your campaigns, these are metrics that you want to recheck in order to understand the impact. So while you think that updating your bids for a certain group is the right way to go, if by increasing those bids for a certain group, you actually lower your impression share or lower your outranking share of your competitors, it may actually hurt you in the long run because you're showing up less for other products that may be actually more important. So use this report as a way to check the changes that you're making in your performance, but also make sure, as with any changes you make in AdWords, that you're giving things a fair amount of time to learn if it's an automated bid strategy, or even just to sink in and see how it performs in the long run. Because it's really easy after one day to say, I don't think this is going to work, or I think this is really working well. You want to get a good sample size of data before you make further changes and allow things to sink in.
Excellent. So now we're going to open this up to a little bit of Q&A. So we're going to pull up our questions right now that some of y'all have been sending us.
Yeah, we've got some great questions coming in. So Stephen is asking, my manual bidding seems to be performing well. How do I know if I should switch to automated bidding?
Okay, so Stephen, hi, thank you for the question. If your manual bidding seems to be performing well, you can go ahead and realistically, I would recommend not changing anything radical right away, because if it's performing well, you don't want to rock the boat too much. However, if you're curious about maybe experimenting with some of these bid strategies that we've been discussing, an experiment may be a great option, or even maybe even an ad group level bid strategy change. That way you can kind of dip your toes without potentially affecting your campaign in an adverse way.
Like applying enhanced CPC to an ad group that's important, but maybe not entirely critical, and letting it run for a solid amount of time, maybe a month or two, and seeing, marginally, just by checking a box, do you get significantly better performance for that ad group specifically? And if it works, then you can apply it to more ad groups or more campaigns. But again, it's all about gradual changes, I've found, with shopping, with AdWords overall. So that's a great question, Stephen. Next, we have Corey asking, product groups are still defined by shopping feed data, correct? So product groups you're actually creating in AdWords. It's not on the feed end. You can create product groups based on feed attributes, but the product groups themselves are created in AdWords. So you can create product group based on a custom label or product type or any attribute that you have in your feed, but the groups themselves are created in AdWords. So great question.
Thanks for that, Corey. Alan asked, will the medium tier products be excluded from the lower tier products? So that's actually a great question. Sometimes we've actually had advertisers call in wondering why an entire campaign stopped serving, and it's because they changed their priority to at low, for example, and the other campaigns were actually on high. So again, this is the high, medium, low determines how we serve your campaign. If you really want to prefer one campaign over another, that's where you would change the setting to high. So if you have a medium tier campaign, again, this is something that you set at the campaign settings. If you have a medium tier campaign and a low tier campaign, the medium tier campaign is going to be preferred over that low tier campaign.
Absolutely. And next question here coming from Natalie. She's asking, is there a way I can speed up the learning period for a new automated bid strategy? And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but to speed up that learning period, you really want to have a lot of conversion data for AdWords to work with. So if you have a really small sample size, that data isn't necessarily as useful. So to speed up the learning period, make sure that you have a lot of conversions, maybe even more so than the minimum, to ensure that you're getting a faster learning period. It's a great question.
Taking a look, there's some other questions. So Jeff asked, how should I go about creating a time-bound seasonal campaign? Great question. So as we were discussing a little bit earlier, these types of seasonal campaigns are going to be some of your top priority campaigns. So first of all, you're going to want to create a new campaign. This campaign has, at the campaign settings level, the ability to change that priority to high. But additionally, you have the ability to have your campaign end date, the start and end date there, so that there's never any accidental overlap into the time that the promotion may be done. Additionally, you can also have the individual ad scheduling set up at the campaign settings level. In terms of the structure, as we were discussing, these types of seasonal campaigns should be broken down by product groups and segmented in a way that is promoting the specific promotions that you may be offering. So if it's Halloween, it should be certain Halloween products within as the example we were using before, Bed Bath & Beyond.
And my biggest tip with creating seasonal campaigns is to create them ahead of time rather than doing it day of. Setting a schedule is great, and you can have the peace of mind that it's created, it has the right structure, you've double checked that you don't have filters you don't want, or that you're segmenting or using the right custom labels, and that your products are actually populating. So that is going to wrap up our session for today. Thank you all so much for the questions. We're so glad that we could talk you through some shopping optimization, get you on the right path in terms of structure, and help you figure out what bid strategies make sense for you, both right now and in the future. So thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Okay.